Good evening and welcome to the November 1st, 2023 Raymond Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting. I will call this meeting to order. I speak for the committee when I express our heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the senseless violence which occurred last week in Lewiston. We encourage anyone struggling with the emotional and/or psychological trauma associated with this event to seek the many state and local resources currently available. I am reminded of the conversation toward the end of last month's meeting involving the close relationship between quality of place and quality of life. The events of last week serve to remind us how fragile these human concepts are. And with that, we'll move to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was October 4, 2023. If there are no additions, deletions, I would ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right, got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Old business. Community Resilience Partnership. I know that we wanted to keep this on the agenda at least until this meeting to discuss what we might go forward with or not, given this initiative. Does anybody want to speak to it?
I believe that one was on my plate. Kate forwarded an address to me for GPCOG, and I got as far as drafting an email to her. But I didn't push the send button because it didn't get quite enough time. I'd like to keep it on the agenda because it could result in some significant funding through grant opportunities, and promise that it doesn't need to take up time on our busy agendas until it comes to some fruition or is proven to not be the right fit at this time.
John, I just want to make sure everyone is aware that even though Raymond is not a member of GPCOG, GPCOG can get state money to help towns join this partnership and do this work. So it doesn't matter that you're not a member, because they'd be asking for state money for it.
Other thoughts, comments? The document was on the e-packet, and I got a chance to read through it. The sense that I got is, as John is saying, that there are opportunities for funding and training for grant writing. I don't know how many resources there are within the municipality for grant writing. Do we have individuals that have that as a task or an expertise?
As it's come up, or as there's been grants that have been presented, various people have applied. I have, Kathy Goslin has, several people have, so.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But we don't have a designated grant writer.
Okay.
And I think that's what GPCOG would certainly help out with, or provide some guidance on, if we were to come up with a culvert replacement program or something for the north half of Raymond or some portion of town, and came up with some budget numbers with Nathan's input, and then put that through GPCOG's review. That's kind of the simplistic version of the work plan as I would see it, and it could bring several $1,000s or more than that to support a identified infrastructure need. I don't see us going after a $40,000 grant to put solar panels on the Raymond school, on the Jordan Small School. That'd be a great project in my view, but especially if it was going to be the town office at some point. And I wouldn't rule that one out, but it might be that there's more urgent needs in public works or or in fire and rescue.
Great, so we'll carry this over to the next meeting for at least discussion and keep it on the agenda.
Good.
All right, also under old business, a legal opinion regarding department head interviews, and that was specifically the question that was asked as far as Dawn was concerned as having been a member on the municipal side of this committee, and whether or not it was appropriate or not to reach out. Sue, would you share with us what you had shared with me?
The attorneys have reiterated that while Don is still on FMLA, technically he's still an employee, and he can't be contacted with anything work-related, and this is considered work-related. He was a part of this committee as a staff member. So once he retires in January, then the committee would be free to approach him.
Okay. Everyone satisfied with that? Okay, so we will basically just kind of put on the back burner any contacts with Don until after he is formally retired. Okay. I guess just on a associated note with that, though, have we, as a committee, the municipal side or North Star, reached out and talked to Kevin Woodbury?
We
I think you
reached
folks
out to
did,
him.
yeah.
I don't think we ever heard back from him. May need to, I'll put it on my list to nudge him again.
I would think that that would be important, and I guess I would echo what one of Don's many interests that I shared with him was in the development of, let's say, extending or improving the internet services in the town. And I would think that that would be something that certainly we'd want to mention in the plan. And especially if we're not going to have the opportunity to talk with Don about that. I will say that there was a presentation that was done at Select Board from a provider, I believe, was it Sebago Fiber?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if any of you haven't had an opportunity to see that, you might want to pull it up. Yeah, I thought it was fairly comprehensive. I believe their background has been that they did Fry Island and connected that. I also learned in my research what a dark fiber ring was, because I didn't really know what that sounded ominous.
Sounds a little creepy.
Yeah.
Help us out.
Yeah,
I mean,
but so a dark fiber, it's a fiber optics rather than cable, and it's a dark fiber meaning that the fibers aren't lit by any internet provider. That basically the fibers are lit and leased to buyers. As an example, the town of Raymond would lease the fibers from this company, but my understanding is that Raymond would be its own internet provider. So in other words, it wouldn't be a commercial company such as Spectrum or others that would be the internet provider, but it would be the town which would be the internet provider service, the IPS. My understanding in listening and I encourage everybody to it was a good and fairly comprehensive presentation, that in the initial outlay, expense-wise, is more than if you were to go and set up a cable system. And that's primarily because the town, if it's going to be its own internet provider, would have to have contracted for maintenance of it. The town would also be responsible for buying all the hardware. So all those things that are provided by, let's say, a Spectrum as part of a contract with them, as far as hardware and infrastructure, would be the responsibility of the town. But from my research and also from this presentation, I'm led to believe that in the long run, it's a less expensive process than having a commercial provider. Once again, my understanding, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was just an initial presentation
Yes.
And that basically what the select board voted to do was to have Sebago Fiber continue with their surveys, and I believe there's going to be a survey coming out. This would initially be for municipal only. So it would be really the fiber ring would basically provide for the municipality. But that, similar to at Fry Island, what it is then extended out to is to the public sector. And so in fact, the citizens of the town of Raymond then would have an option to go to another provider, meaning the town. And so it's kind of a blend of public-private, which certainly piques my interest. So anyway, just to keep that on the more or less the horizon as to what might develop going forward, I think would also be interesting as far as looking at the next 10 years in Raymond. I think I've mentioned it once before. My understanding, limited as it is, about internets and IT and the like, is that the best estimate I heard is that with devices coming online, the estimate is that it will be required to have a 10% increase per year in capacity. So with everything from growth in population to just the number of devices that are, I mean, as I understand it now, refrigerators can talk to you, and all sorts of things like that. So that going forward means that in 10 years, which is kind of the extent of this committee's looking forward, we'll need 100% more capacity than we have today. Frank?
I understand Kevin is the person who's headed up the studies for the town, is that correct? I would make a proposal that we invite Kevin to a meeting, maybe the next meeting, and talk to us about what the outlook is for providing internet and other services, because there are going to be other services over the next years that will be coming in through technology, so that we have a really good handle, that we all have a really good handle on what's happening, what could happen, and what the consequences of it would be.
I would echo that. And my thoughts were, when you were speaking, that if the town is the provider, that we may maybe possibly do a partnership with the RSU. It would seem like they're gonna need the same things that we're gonna need, and they could piggyback off us or join us in that discussion.
Both good recommendations. My understanding is that, at least from the presentation to the select board, was that what Sebago Fiber was looking at was looking at engaging a number of other municipalities in the Sebago Lakes region. And so there would be the opportunity there, along with, I would say, the state looking to see that our municipality is working cooperatively with other surrounding municipalities in endeavors to either reduce redundancies or cost or increase quality of services. So, I mean, I think that there'd be a number of reasons why we should get involved in that. Yeah. So, can we do that, Sue? Could you invite?
Texting you now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And hopefully we'll get a response, and we'll get Kevin here for the next meeting.
Nothing like the present.
That's right.
And I will tell you, we have been having a few technical difficulties, and Kayla wasn't able to hear the first bit of the committee meeting.
Oh,
She might be asking you some questions.
okay.
later.
Fair enough.
I'm here now.
Yeah.
Okay, Kayla.
I can hear you.
All right. All right, then, moving on to the new business. Comprehensive plan article for Wyndham Eagle. Frank had reached out to me and discussed it with me, his interest, and I think it was discussed at the last meeting about contacting an individual or the editor that he is familiar with at the Wyndham Eagle. And Frank did that.
I did that, and I got a call from the reporter the other day, and I had Peter call her and talk to her. We do now have a local reporter in Raymond for the Eagle, which will be a big step forward for us, and I don't know what the result of your conversation with her was, so.
And I'd be happy to share that. So, yes, and this was, let's see if I got my notes here, Kendra Raymond.
Yep.
And she is a reporter for the Wyndham Eagle, and she called me yesterday and was very interested in doing a story, an article on comprehensive plan in Raymond and the committee. She'd already done a lot of her own homework. She seemed to be very knowledgeable about what a comprehensive plan was and the like, which I found good. And basically just had, we were about a half hour with a telephone interview. What I will tell you is this, and I don't have a whole lot of experience talking with reporters. My wife in her job spends a lot of time talking with local and even national newspapers and other articles and like. You can imagine this last week, she's had quite a busy phone interview issue or times discussing schools and how they're impacted by things like the events in Lewiston and the like. But I've at least learned from her that when you're talking with a reporter, you want to be free with information, and at the same time, you want to be careful about what you say, because sometimes things can get convoluted, or you can the content or the context of what you said doesn't really what comes out in the article. But I felt fairly comfortable with this individual, and so there will be an article coming out this Friday in the Wyndham Eagle on the comprehensive plan. And she also did say that she would be very happy. She asked, appropriately, can I use that little arrow thing that you have? I said, you mean our logo? And she said, yes. I said, yeah, actually, I was designed by the committee, and it was kind of, it's been used on a lot of our informational sheets or whatever. She was very interested in North Star, and how it came about selecting North Star and all that sort of stuff. Like I say, I don't know how much of this will actually be reflected in the article. But she was interested in the initial survey, what the initial response was, and she also was very impressed that we had a QR. Well, we're Raymond. We're right on the cutting edge there, So she asked if she could use the logo in the article, and I said yes, that would be fine. But so she was covering her bases as far as making sure she wasn't doing any infringements, copyright or otherwise. We don't have a copyrighted, but that's okay. And so I would ask you just to pick up an Eagle on Friday and see what is described in there, and that she was more than willing to do follow-up articles and publicize our meetings and the like. And I said we've already been using the Eagle for some of those things, but yeah. Frank?
I would just suggest that you share her name and phone number with people from North Star, because that could be a contact for them as well if there's something they need to get into that newspaper.
Yeah, and feel free to pass along our contact info if she needs any photos or image files or whatever. But thank you, Frank and Peter, for doing this. This is great, and let's definitely plan to do a follow-up before the event.
Where?
You're always looking.
Oh, yes, Kayla.
Oh, I was actually just going to ask if you had managed to talk to her about the upcoming public outreach event.
I did. I mentioned that, gave her the dates, the time, and the place. Told her that we were anxious to get as many citizens of the town of Raymond there to share their viewpoints and concerns with the committee. And I also emphasized the fact, which I think is the mantra that we're going forward and have, been pretty consistent with from the beginning, which is we need the community's take, that it's not this committee that is going to be writing that comprehensive plan. It's not going to be North Star that writes the comprehensive plan, that it's going to be the citizens that take an active interest in their community that are going to write that plan. And she said she understood that, which is good. That answer your question, Kayla?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, we can move on to the under new business, the discussion of LD 2003, and Sean had informed me that he had attended a rather lengthy workshop involving that, so we'll ask Sean to report to us what he found.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took a 3-hour class on LD 2003. That way you all didn't have to do it. This is just a very brief overview of what I learned. In full disclosure, there still seems to be some changes and some unanswered questions, so I don't want to get into get too deep into it, but I just want to give everyone an idea of what is coming. Do your own research on this. It's just an overview. So LD 2003 focuses on removing regulatory barriers to increase housing production in Maine while preserving municipality ability to create land use plans and protect environmental resources. This legislation requires municipalities to create or amend local ordinances to allow for additional density for affordable developments in certain areas, multiple dwelling units on its lots designed for residential use, and one accessory dwelling unit on the same lot as a single-family dwelling in any area where residential uses are permitted. So what is a accessory dwelling? It's intended to be a smaller unit above the garage, in a basement, interior garage. It doesn't have to be attached, it also can be detached. The panel was unable to speak on if tiny homes, homes that can be moved, that's still a little bit up in the air. They didn't want to talk too much about that. And I suspect mobile homes as well, since they can be moved. Still some unanswered questions about that. ADU must be 190 square feet minimum, but municipalities can set the max size. So for example, South Portland, they're saying up to 1,200, but typically 800 is the max. Shoreland zoning still applies. Wastewater must be adequate along with water needs. Setbacks still apply. Towns that adopt law through without town meetings, this is going to affect January 1st. So towns that adopt through town meetings, such as Raymond, this will go into effect July 1st, 24. Municipalities can choose how to decide on tear downs versus vacant land. So let's just say that you have a tear down. Do you treat that as the same way as if it was just vacant land? Accessory dwellings versus primary dwellings, it's up to the township. So if you had built a accessory unit and you want to live there and rent out the big house, that's going to be really up to the town. And the towns may regulate short-term rentals, which I thought was important. For example, the town of Yarmouth has not pursued short-term regulations, but South Portland is restricting them. Towns cannot outright reject homes in shoreland zones, but they still must comply with all the setbacks. If you want some more information, maine.gov/DECD/Housing Opportunity Program. It's going to be where you're going to find a lot of this information. My general thoughts on it, kind of the good and the bad. This is being done because of a housing crisis that Maine has, and I think the idea is good to get more affordable homes into the area. So, we can attract younger families, or be compliant with affordable homes. Bad, I kind of just see it as a Band-Aid. Now, we don't have a choice in this, but I was talking to a friend of mine in Colorado who's a realtor, and she was saying that they have too many of these accessory dwelling units, and they're trying to cut back on it. I kind of feel like the short-term rentals kind of defeat the purpose of this act, but some towns can choose to restrict it, and other towns may decide not to restrict it. And the biggest thing, I just kind of feel it gets people living in little pods. These accessory dwellings are not supposed to be super large. Like they were saying, maybe around 800 square feet, but the town's going to have the decision on that. So just kind of my thoughts on it. I want to bring that up because this is coming no matter what. Towns in Maine don't have a choice in it. So I'd be really interested to see how Raymond kind of adopts this and what, if they allow short-term rentals or if the town decides that short-term rentals are not going to be allowed. I know we kind of talked about that a lot at our previous meetings, so it'd just be interesting to see. So that's LD 2003 in a nutshell. Any questions?
It applies, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, to an existing lot. You can't create new lots and have them have these smaller units on them. The law is mostly about providing additional housing within an existing developed lot. Is that right or not?
When the question was asked about that,
Yeah.
the question was posed as, hey, if you have a home and you tear it down, does that equal vacant land, or how does that kind of work? My understanding of it was that vacant land is part of this program too. So just if I understand correctly, if it is vacant land, then yes, you can still do the accessory dwelling units on it. So it doesn't have to be
An existing home.
it doesn't have to be
in place.
existing home right now in place.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm gonna have quite a long history with the subject in Raymond and in Wyndham. For as long as I've been a code officer in Raymond, we've had accessory dwellings allowed on lots. Up until 2017, they were allowed everywhere in town. You could have an accessory dwelling on the shoreline zone or rural residential village, didn't matter. And our cap is 700 square feet. It's written into our ordinance. Other towns like Wyndham, they have 600 square feet. But in a shoreline zone, the way the shoreline zoning is written, to have a second dwelling, which an accessory apartment is considered a separate dwelling, you have to have twice the land area, twice the shorefront, and twice the road frontage. So in our shoreline zone, that would mean 6 acres for 2 dwellings in LLR1 and 4 acres in LLR2. So
That's the town,
that's a town
not the
ordinance.
state.
So we've had, when this first came out, we contacted the town attorney. We've had multiple discussions with Phil Saucier about this topic. And you're right on. For towns that don't have any accessory dwellings in their ordinance, we do. So we're kind of covered. The way our ordinance is written, it doesn't address short-term rentals. That'll be something that we do need to talk about. But we have accessory dwellings. There are a bunch of conditions. They have to meet setbacks, as you mentioned, and there's a maximum size. Doesn't matter whether it's detached or attached. They have to have a septic system that will handle another dwelling, and that minimum size for a dwelling is 180 gallons a day. In Raymond, so if you have a 3-bedroom septic, you're going to have to add 180 gallons to your septic to handle that accessory dwelling. We have a lot of them. We have a lot of them in the shoreline zone. That didn't change until 2017. So you'll see a lot of garages in the shoreline zone that have accessory dwellings, but they're not allowed anymore. That may be something that, because Raymond has such a increased setback for a shoreline zone, like the whole Raymond Cape, or 600 feet around a lake or a stream, instead of the 250, and maybe something that we want to discuss and say, look, down on the Cape, if they're not right on the water, maybe if they're 250 feet back, they're out of the DEP shoreline zone, maybe that's something we should look at. I've been thinking that since even before I was on this committee, because it doesn't make sense. If you're in the middle of the Cape, a half a mile from the shore, you're not increasing the use of the lake by having an accessory dwelling. The DEP's argument has always been, if you have an accessory dwelling, you're going to have the main house, that you're going to have your 3-bedroom house that could be rented out as an Airbnb, and then you could have the garage rented out as an Airbnb. There's a huge increase in use for that particular lot on the water. So that's how they've looked at it. A lot of our lots are grandfathered. You could have a lot that's 50 by 100. It wouldn't make sense to have an accessory dwelling on that small a lot, but we used to allow it. We don't now. So that's kind of where, you know, we're as a town. The legal opinion from our law office is we don't have to do anything other than address the short-term rentals for now. So that would be a discussion that we should have, and I can do whatever you want as far as get additional information, but that's where we're at.
Interesting. Yeah, we always appreciate your wealth of knowledge, especially with this. It sounds like Raymond's already. There were a couple of towns, like I think South Portland was kind of ahead of the game a little bit. Yarmouth as well. Those were two towns that were there speaking. And I kind of feel like Raymond is almost a little bit ahead of the curve because we.
I'm not sure why that is, but I think it was addressed in the 2004 comprehensive plan. It must have been. I'm not sure when we adopted access. We used to have in-law apartments. So you could have an in-law apartment, which was the difference between in-law and accessory is an in-law apartment has to be connected, like you can just walk from one, it's not a separate dwelling, it's just grandma lives down in the basement and there's no separation. In an accessory apartment, it's separated physically with a 1 hour rated wall so that if there's a fire in one dwelling, the other people are protected and they can get out. So the other difference is you can rent out an accessory apartment. An in-law apartment, it has to be an in-law.
Had to be family, didn't it?
Had to be family. And how do you track that? So, you know, grandma lives there, she passes away, you get an accessory apartment, and you get Joe Smith from down the street, just needs a place to live, and you rent it out. That's, I think, what was happening in Raymond, and that's probably why we went to the accessory apartment definition over the in-law apartment. So I think that's it for now.
I guess, Chris, my question would be this, and I guess I could aim it at Greg as well as far as the planning board is concerned. But since this is really, I mean, they postponed it for a year, just about implementing it because of the pushback, as I understand it, from municipalities saying, especially ones that don't have those ordinances in place, it's a process to get an ordinance changed. It's not something that it happens easily. It's like changing the Constitution. You know, it's made to be hard for a reason. But I guess my question would be, what's going on right now at the level of the planning board involving short-term rentals? Because if I understand it, what the select board did at a meeting not that long ago that was attended by a number of people that were concerned about short-term rentals, both pro and con, was that they were going to wait and see. And so, you know, here it is, November 1st. This goes into effect in July, and I would assume that, Sue, can you tell me when does the warrant come out?
The warrant will come out, it'll be approved finally in May, early May, and late April if I can finagle it.
Yeah. So to me, it occurs to me that it's not that far away. And I'm just curious, what is the planning board, what is the select board, what are they doing? Because quite honestly, I see it as being an issue. When this LD 2003 goes into effect, there could be a rush for people to do things before ordinances are in place. And, you know, after the fact, I think you get back to that, although I think I'm cautious of using the term grandfathered, but that's my concern. And especially if the objective here is to provide more low income or affordable or workforce or places for grandma to live, that you know, these structures turning into bed and breakfasts and turning into you know, short-term rentals is a concern I have. So I'm just curious, either Greg, do you know what is the planning board, if they got this on their radar? What are you talking about?
More or less, yes. The next meeting, we're talking about potentially addressing any issues to do with ordinance changes, and I'm sure that these issues will be
Short-term
brought up.
rentals would be discussed.
Yes, we've talked about that in the past. We haven't taken any action or anything like that, but It's on our radar.
Have we adopted a tiny house ordinance?
No. No.
I believe that the tiny house organizations, if I understand, in the state, have set like 400 square feet as a maximum. So, in other words, they've kind of defined, at least the industry has, what a tiny home is. And they've defined that as less than 400 square feet.
That's certainly tiny, I would say, for a living situation.
Yeah, but
I don't think the younger generation is interested in that.
yeah.
And
John, could you do your mic towards you? Yeah, turn it a little bit to your.
I'll speak to it next time.
I think the younger generation is interested in this tiny home thing. Do you know anything about, I mean, they can be moved. So for tax purposes, they might have a tiny home on the land and then remove it at some point. How do you determine taxes on that? Is that something that you guys are taking into consideration, or not really?
We have, to my knowledge, we haven't had a huge discussion about tiny houses. I've had quite a bit of discussions in the last 6-7 years when this idea came about. There was a woman named Corrine Watson from Wyndham that started a movement to do tiny home developments in different communities around this area, Wyndham being one, and Raymond was on her sites as well. The state has taken a stance that tiny homes, to have a dwelling, you still need to have certain things that a normal house would have for public safety. A being it needs to be anchored down so it doesn't blow away in a hurricane or some kind of windstorm, or floated away in a flood. It has to have its own service, which means electric service, which means it has to have an electrical panel and a meter like anything else. They need to meet certain code requirements for egress. And the codes, the ICC codes, have adopted some more or less, I would say, less restrictive codes for these tiny homes, like a modular home or a trailer. Those regulations are different than a regular house. They're inspected at a facility approved by the Manufactured Housing Board, Kaiser Homes or New England Homes or whatever the name of the company is. They have people that inspect them. The problem with tiny homes is, let's say you built a tiny home up in Caribou, Maine, and you truck it down to Raymond, and you want to plop it on a lot up on North Raymond Road. I got
Yeah, we're back. We had a little technical difficulties, but we're back, and the discussion continues on the LD 2003 law that will go into effect in July. So I guess, Chris, I have a question as far as going forward. One of the things that this committee is going to be discussing as far as land use, and when we get to that point, are going to be such things as, is there a need in other zones other than the village to allow for two-family homes? With this new law, is that something that's going to be necessary, in your opinion, as far as trying to say in rural residential, we're going to change the ordinance to say you can build a two-family?
You'll be allowed to do that by right because of the state law. So even if Raymond doesn't change its ordinance, someone will be able to basically go to Chris, and if Chris says no, sue you and say, I can build this here because the state law says I can build a duplex by right on any vacant piece of land.
So is it to our advantage to have an ordinance? Do we
Yes.
have more leverage if we have an ordinance?
I would
Yes.
say that's always
Yeah.
the rule.
So I guess what I'm saying, not to, put the fear of God in Greg, but it's kind of like, it sounds like they're, although on the surface it looks like, and I'm pleased that the town has positioned itself to a point where we're able to deal or don't have to deal with LD 2003. It sounds like there are a lot of issues that are going to have to come up in land use and in ordinances that are going to have to address some of the issues associated with this new law.
Yeah, my response to that would be, I think, as we discussed while we were off air, I think the committee should schedule some type of Zoom meeting with anybody that wants to participate, or maybe we have Phil on a Zoom meeting and we talk at a meeting here as a group. I mean, we can do it either way. I mean, Kate's definitely going to want to be involved. I'll be involved, and Sean, you expressed interest, and so did Danielle. So I don't know. Is it the committee's pleasure to try to do that as a group? I mean, we could invite Phil to have a 15, 20-minute Zoom call with us and deal with it in the next meeting.
I'm running out, that's for sure. You know?
I guess, like, I don't want to be the sky is falling. It just seems as I'm following this issue that
No, I think you're
it seems
absolutely
like
right.
that the time is growing short. To
It
have
is.
some action.
Does your so when you change ordinances, and Raymond, does that start with the planning board or the select board?
Not select board, planning board.
Planning
So
board,
yeah, I would
selectmen.
recommend, although everyone in this committee is interested and that's awesome, I would recommend starting at the planning board, because that'll be how you'll have to go through
That's
your
what I was sitting here
process.
thinking, that while it would be interesting for this committee to hear that conversation, to get this moving on, I think we need to get Phil talking with you and Alex and the planning board.
Yeah, we could still sit down on that meeting, so it would be beneficial, I mean, especially to this group, because this is, I mean, it really affects us, what we're trying to do and everything. I had a question about, are we going to have a cap on how many of these can be built? Because I think towns can have a cap, so if you're saying that only 1,000 ADUs can be built in the year, do you know if, do we have anything like that in place now, or will we?
No, we used to have a growth management ordinance where we, any ADU or single family was counted towards a growth cap, and that didn't work out so well. So we got rid of that, what,
Oh my goodness, that was back in the early 2000s.
16, 15? I don't know, it was a while back.
Basically, we put it in place, and it never reached the threshold because the market changed.
Well, and it was, the way it was created, it was based on a percent of the years
Right.
prior permits issued, and it was kind of like diminishing return. It went to zero.
Yeah.
I think I came to the selectmen saying, we gotta get rid of this zoning ordinance, growth management ordinance, because we're gonna go down to 6 dwellings next year.
Yep.
Yes,
And
if I had-
The average of the prior 4 years, whatever it was.
yeah, because it, you know, when the economy
Long
was good, we
climb
were
back.
building 30, 40 houses a year, 70 at one time.
Right.
And then it went down to 30, 20, and then it was a certain percent of that 10-year average, and it went to 6. So we got rid of it. So I don't know of any cap in that legislation. I'm not as familiar with it as you just did the training.
Yeah, it would occur to me that as state law goes, that they aren't going to, that the sense that I, in reading it, is that they're not going to allow you to cap it. The idea is that they're opening it up to all communities in the state, and that it's state law, and that you will follow state law.
It's funny because it's contradictory to the home rule thing.
Well, it is. So once again, I mean, that means that it goes to court.
Yes.
So any municipality has the right to challenge the state.
I think as this develops, you're going to see after the initial effective date and the subsequent effective date, you know, you cannot, unless there's going to be an opinion that comes out in advance, to a certain extent there already was, there were some amendments to this, and I don't believe that there are going to be any additional ones prior to this rubber meeting the road. And as a result, after that, you're going to start to see how the applications, where the holes lie. Chris is going to start to see it, and municipalities are going to start to encounter that, and the answer is not going to be clear, and litigation is the only way to address it after that. And so it's going to be who wants to bring the issue, who has the financial backing to bring the issue. So I think you'll start to see some of the communities that do have more, who are more affluent, be the ones that are the forefront of some of these discussions. And the court is likely going to be the one at the end of the day. I'm sure every single one of these is going to go to the law court because everybody's trying to figure this out. So I would expect that even if we do create ordinances to come into line with this, there could be changes that impact the ordinances that we create within 3 to 4 years. So it's going to be a moving target no matter how we approach it.
But with our growth zone in the village, we were set up at least to have one of our zones very well structured to accommodate the new 2003. And in my mind, the question of how applicable it will be in the rural and the rural residential, if it's as equally applicable there, then we certainly want to participate in that process.
Well, and Greg, didn't we rezone within the past 20 years the area around village and village residential and
Yeah, that
think-
got changed.
Yeah.
And
I mean, what a discussion looks like about what the size of those zones should be and how we direct. I think that's part of the bigger conversation about where we want the growth to be. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what drove the comprehensive plan the last time, drove the growth into that area so that they, for instance, right now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Honey Hills development, up right by the Good Life Deli or close to the Good Life Deli. There's 25 12 duplexes in one single family home. So there's 25 units there. And it was, it has public water. It has walking distance to the town resources, which is great. And it's amazing to me because I see these structures going up and they're really high end. And I never thought that in Raymond you could rent these out, these duplexes, for the prices they're getting. He's already got 8 of them rented for the future. They're not even finished out of 25, and they go for $3,000 a month.
Yep.
So that doesn't address affordable housing. To me, that's not affordable housing. But it is an example of a well-developed, small cluster of buildings that's in a growth area close to where we want it. So maybe, I don't know how you get affordable because of the prices of materials. It's crazy. And contractors and everything is out of sight.
Yeah, I think that when we had this discussion, Chris, at a previous meeting, just as far as the affordability issue, and when I interviewed the chair of the planning board, and basically his comment was, well, affordability is relative to the community as far as what's affordable or not. What I tell you is in LD 2003, the state makes it very clear what affordable is. In its description, and I guess in the discussion we had last about the Honey Hill, it was basically the fact that had we had a requirement in the ordinance that an open space subdivision requires 10% of the structures being affordable,
That was different, yeah.
would that have changed the developer's mind? And we don't know that, but we
Right.
don't know that because we don't have that built into an ordinance.
But we do have that built into some of the clusters that are in the rural residential.
Yeah.
For
So
instance, the one that was on Valley Road,
Yep.
Chase Custom Homes owned, now they don't, it's been sold. That had a requirement for a certain amount of elderly housing, over
Yeah.
55.
Yeah. And that
So-
was by ordinance?
And that
Or
was by
that-
ordinance, yeah.
By ordinance,
Yep, they got a bonus.
yeah.
If
They
you
got a-
had over 55, you get more density.
Yeah.
There's a density bonus. That's still in our ordinance.
So not to belabor this, I guess what I'd take away from this discussion is that there's a planning board meeting next week. And my sense is that it's probably going to be well attended. And that under.
I better be right about what I said.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting under public comment to see what actually gets generated to the board. And So just on a related subject, John had forwarded to me an article that he saw and that was related to this issue. And so, John, if you could just share a little bit of the highlights of that article.
This was from Sunday, October 8, Maine Sunday Telegram, and our View column, opinion piece. And it was quite a strong call to action, or scolding, depending on your view, but a call to action to for all towns to take on the task of making available affordable housing in Maine, and I think they're using affordable with both a lowercase and uppercase a, as we've learned to speak in this world with our little group this week with John Clark. So there's, but the number there, yeah, 84,000 new build. Maine needs 84,000 new building units, double the current rate. And you know, they cite the other apparent crises in the state of Maine, and climate and otherwise, but this one is right here in the state. And so I'm not going to belabor the point to read any further from it, but I'll pass it around. And it seems as though this committee is pretty well focused on accommodating that in some way, and we certainly hope that the plan achieves that, and it might be with a couple different versions of affordable. One piece that came out in our discussions this week, I don't want to steal from that content, but our location constrains the ability for some folks perhaps to be out here. If they were going to be in an employment situation in Portland, and it's a 45-minute mission to get down there and get back, that just might mean a little different version of affordable housing in Raymond. But it sounds like 2003 is going to serve up a pretty significant dish to the Cumberland County in terms of housing, and we apparently are going to, at least initially, not be too impacted by it because of our existing ordinance, if I'm hearing things right tonight. But bottom line, the comp plan ought to have a pretty good chapter on affordable housing, and at a value that our folks can afford.
And I know we may be, and I can certainly appreciate North Star's perspective on the fact that, we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves, that there's going to be a lot of work that goes into land use in general. But I will tell you, I believe this committee has been very engaged with this issue, as I believe we should, because it is actually a reality, and it's something that's going to impact at least the next 10 years in Raymond as far as development is concerned. And can I just ask, who was it that interviewed the code enforcement officer?
John Clark and I.
Yeah.
Yep.
And did he have any comments as far as affordable housing or small or tiny houses or anything like that?
Not on small and tiny houses that I recall. On the affordable housing, I think acknowledge that affordability is an issue. And I think that some of the classic incentives for developers, density bonuses being one of those, was something to consider. But also the makeup of Raymond without any sewer, right, and water in town makes some of that higher density difficult.
Sure.
Just because you need a larger surface, a larger square footage plot, and you need a big enough septic for that. So we have some structural challenges that make some of those things more difficult than towns with water sewer that you can connect to.
Sure. I did hear recently from a friend of mine who is a developer that just as far as you can overextend yourself on policy and ordinances as far as the city of Portland is concerned. I'm certainly not comparing the town of Raymond to the city of Portland. But they have a requirement of 25% affordable housing, which that my friend happened to suggest to me has caused for there to be a retreat of development from the city of Portland, because it's just, it really cuts too much into their margin. And so what they're looking at is at other outlying communities to do developments, because they just feel, or he just felt that 25% is a bit extraordinary. So I would just say that, certainly we look at being more, less radical, I would say, than something like that, but we're not Portland.
Yeah, and I would just like to, kind of expand on some of the ideas, so that main housing report, says 84,000 units by 2030. Basically, and it says, there's been 38,000 units that we just haven't produced that we should have produced. And then they're looking at growth, which is another 45,000, 46,000 on top of that. So a large percentage of that kind of equals the existing housing crisis. And they're also predicting it getting worse. And they do break the state into 3 sections, so they don't do it by county necessarily. And we fall within the coastal section, which is the largest section. And so we have a historic underproduction of housing of 21,000 units. And so we have a projected future need of up to 28,000 units. So, this kind of covers our county and along the kind of mid-coast, but it equals close to 49,000 units. And I think if you look at any of these larger cities, I think the, Lewiston, Auburn being one and Portland being another that are kind of included in this, anything we produce in town is going to pale in comparison to what they could produce. And also from, an affordability and from a services standpoint, we're not going to be able to offer services for, certain types of renters and certain types of owners that these larger cities would be able to offer as well. And then to kind of echo the employment standpoint, living here and working in Portland or working in Lewiston and Auburn requires a car, which is another cost burden. And, these are things that I think when we look at how this affordable housing is typically paid for, the state is looking to optimize how their dollars are spent. And Raymond is not particularly well suited as a good way of optimizing those dollars. But I do think that, there's the affordability, which is kind of like the subsidized, and then there's like little a affordable, which is, essentially like, are we rent burdened or not? And that's typically defined as 30% of your income goes to paying your rent. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's something we could address. And I think there's different ways to address that with types of housing, smaller houses or higher density and things. But I think, the affordability bonuses, I'm all for it, but I think like those other larger, metropolitans likely have more to offer in those bonuses, and they're more desirable. And I do think the infrastructure costs is a really big hurdle to get over. And I just, if you already have a town that has in-place infrastructure, it would make sense from a developer's point of view to look at those places first. But I also, my point is just that, there's a huge need for housing across all of Maine, and, without putting too much strain on our town, we can only do so much. Yeah. We're not going to solve it, and, we can be part of the solution, though. And I think that's
a great comment. And Danelle had an observation in your conversation with the finance individual in town. And I thought that was a great point, which is any affordable housing is going to have to be accompanied with infrastructure improvements and services. And I don't know, I agree with you, John, I don't think we're positioned to do that. The other side of that conversation is, can my kids afford to stay in Raymond if they want to? So I think we'll be juggling those two issues.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah. The kids have been voting with their feet, leaving the state. a lot of the problem isn't us, it's just a poor business state. People don't want to stay here, they don't earn enough money, they can't afford the houses. That the cost of a house isn't necessarily dictated by what happens in Maine. It's a sort of a national cost, and the people in Maine just don't have the money to buy all the things they need to build a house. But we're retained income, we're like the lowest in the nation after taxes and wages, and after taxes and any other expenses. Those are things that are totally out of our control.
Yeah, and I would agree as far as circumstances go. I mean, not to belabor the issue too much, but it's you know, the events of last week. You can see how quickly you know, the quality of place gets impacted. So you know, I mean, a lot of this is very fluid. As Chris mentioned, we put basically a cap on building when we were seeing a building boom, and then it seems like right after we did that, the bottom fell out of the building boom. So a lot of this is trying to predict stuff that you know, it's at best a guess, and it can't really be predicted. It's a lot of it's market driven and the like. But you know. Sebago Lake has an algae bloom, and all of a sudden, this isn't the place to come in the summer. I mean, there's you can do things to try and prevent that, but in the end, a lot of it's out of your control. Okay, if there's nothing else, and I know we've spent a long time discussing that, we could get on to John. Do you want to report on your work group as far as a vision statement?
Yeah. So we had a good few meetings. Danelle, John, and I. We had a lot of thought went into, you know, first reading through the 2004 vision statement. You know, looking at multiple examples of other towns' vision statements. Not, you know, some in Maine, some outside of Maine. You know, some philosophical talk on what a vision statement versus a mission statement is. And then, you know, we took a crack at kind of crafting our own vision statement. And the way we approached this was really to look at the survey, the results that we had, you know, because coming at this from, you know, this is the town's comprehensive plan, and it's, you know, we're the committee, but it's the town's plan. You know, we really tried to, you know, address the data points that we had. You know, the biggest one being the natural resources. You know, I think, you know, this is supposed to be a statement that should be kind of broad and, you know, address a lot of things, which is difficult to do without, you know, having a 4 or 5 page memo. And, you know, we try to keep this as concise as possible, but basically taking into account, you know, what was important that we could glean from, you know, the summer survey. So Danelle put together a great draft that I will read for everyone. And I will just say that the previous vision statement was almost 3/4 of a page. We have tried to keep this as concise as possible, and in an effort to not oversimplify things, you know, we welcome all kind of comments and criticism, and, you know, this is not a final draft. This is intended to be a first draft, and then also, you know, likely when we get more information from future surveys and future public input, we would expect that this would get updated. So what we have so far is Raymond is a small, beautiful community within the larger growing region of southern Maine. As a town, we place priority and value on those features which set us apart and allow us to thrive as neighbors with each other and the surrounding towns. We desire to protect our natural resources, which are the heart of our identity and commerce. We also wish to support and build on our vibrant community. Likewise, we must provide those services necessary to maintain town infrastructure for the benefit of our community. In planning for the future of our town, we seek to develop a balanced and valued approach to steward our desirable community where so many come to live, work, and play. And we can send that around for everyone. You know, and I think it's, you know, natural resources was the clear favorite. You of that survey, and I think, also echoed on the board. And I think, of a lot of discussions we have had is, okay, there's a lot of things changing in the world, but the one thing we don't want to change in town is, our love, our need, our respect for the environment, for our lakes, our creeks, our rivers, our forests, everything. And, we realize that it is a great recreational tool, but it's also, it's a great commerce tool, and, it really is at the heart of what makes Raymond Raymond. And, there were other things we tried to address. I think, one of the negative things, or one of the concerns, that was brought up in the survey, was overbuilding and overdevelopment. And so I think that was something where, I think there's a lot of different voices, and what constitutes as overbuilding is subjective, and overdevelopment is subjective, or bad development versus good development. And to get into the nuance of some of these topics, we didn't think was necessarily appropriate in the vision statement, being a high level statement. And that's kind of where we wanted to, kind of address it through, we need to plan for the future. We need to, have a practical, balanced approach to this, and that's why we use those particular words. Develop a balanced, valued approach, steward the desirable community. One of the points in the previous vision statement was change is inevitable. I think, most people would agree with that. I think there's a speed component, how quickly things change, and change is also nuanced. So, I think in this vision statement, as a welcome, to hear everybody on the committee, and also the public, of what works, what doesn't work. I think, we wanted to keep it short, so we hit the main things, and, we got the big things right. We didn't want to have a lot of wordplay. I mean, I think, at least my time being on this committee, I've heard Raymond is practical. They will do the practical thing, and, we wanted to have a practical vision statement.
Great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's that?
Great. What does North Star think?
We think you did a great job. I like how concise it is, and I think that you did pull out a lot of the biggest ideas from the survey, which is really great. I think that we do think it's a little short. I
Okay.
think that it really focuses.
I agree.
John had a shorter version.
I have a shorter version of it.
I mean, you could have you could try and do it in a sentence, or, try and make the shortest one. But I think,
It'd be
no,
a vision sentence.
it's not so much about the length as it is, I think this is a really strong statement of values, but I think you could hit some more specifics in it.
Okay.
So I think I can let Sam, do you want to give some of your ideas? Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as Kate's saying, probably a bit more descriptive language. So in the first sentence, when you talk about Raymond as a part of the growing region of southern Maine, I think something more specific would be Raymond's really the heart of the lakes region. So that kind of narrows it down. A lot of people said on the survey too that they valued Raymond's location, so as a place that's sort of quiet and rural, but it's still close to service centers like Wyndham and Portland. I think another thing too is so it mentions natural resources, but I think maybe calling out some of the ones in Raymond that are important, like, Raymond Community Forest and Sebago Lake, Rattlesnake Mountain, for example. And then talking about planning for the future, so trying to figure out how to balance natural resource protection with well-planned development and affordable housing. So something kind of just to add a little bit more description to what's there.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you didn't read I thought you had a good idea here, was to talk about how Raymond, Raymond really specifically provides a quiet counterpoint to
Yes,
the
to Wyndham.
frenetic energy of the region, or to Wyndham, or
Yeah.
Greater
Portland,
Portland. And I think
yeah.
that's a nice specific to kind of touch on. And I think another thing that we thought you might want to mention in here is the idea of a year-round community. Because you have a very large seasonal community, so whether it's just balancing the needs and traffic and pressures of having a seasonal and a year-round while making sure you serve the year-round community or something to that effect. And I know we haven't gotten into some of those details like in the survey and stuff yet, but those are sort of some of the things that we thought might kind of like tie it a little more down to Raymond specifically.
Those are great points. Thank you.
We can send you our little bulleted
Sure.
list.
Yeah, no, we can absolutely work with all of that. I think one of the things we talked about was trying to avoid coming down with a position on hot topic issues, because
Sure.
one of the points of the survey was a lot of people don't want more development. One of the points of our reality is it's coming whether we want it or not. So how do we address that within a vision statement while communicating this idea and the fact that we are doing this on behalf of the town. So we can take another stab at it with those points. And I think our question would be what's your advice on some of those hot topic issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you write a vision statement, the goal is for it to be consensus based.
Right.
Which is a really good goal. It's a really hard thing to do in practice because everybody interprets things differently. So one person saying we need to balance well-planned development with natural resources, someone else might interpret that as saying like, no, we don't want more development.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think, something that could be helpful too is to kind of just come up with a list of what these controversial things are, like what you think like the hot topics are that we're not sure how to talk about. Because I think we can sort of think about if there are other ways of getting to them. I do think like even with development, kind of like talking about the needs of a year-round community and seasonal pressures and how to balance that could be a way of addressing some of those ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think we can come up with ideas. We know how to do it.
Yeah.
We just tried not to do it. So
Yeah,
we
and
can adjust.
The need for housing is, I mean, that didn't even blip on the survey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We were cherry picking the survey, working down from the
Yeah.
high to the low, and the need for affordable housing or that topic was pretty lightly awarded, if you will, in the survey.
I think, it's interesting when you do these, when people talk about housing in the abstract, we talk a lot about affordable housing, but when we do surveys, we don't see that answer as much. And I think that's partly because a lot of the people taking the survey already own a house in the community, so they're not like personally, unless they have a relative or someone who's impacted, they're not always personally thinking about it. But when you ask someone like, what do you think in the big picture is a big problem? Like everyone says housing.
Yeah, I guess I'd be concerned as far as the message that I seem to get, at least when I talk with my friends and family in the town, is that we're not anti-growth. By the same token, no one that I talk to is interested in Raymond developing urban sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a matter of being able to balance those two, as you're saying, into a message that's not controversial. And the other thing I'd say, as far as location, and this is just my own personal thought, when I decided to move here to Raymond, one of the first things I looked at was, Raymond is located on one of the only major east-west roads in the state, and it's about equal distance from the Maine coast to the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So it's kind of like, wow. If I was going to look for a place, personally, I love the coast and I love the mountains. So, that was just my thought as far as describing the location. And, you know, I'm not worried about offending other individuals in the Lake region if they read that and say, no, we're the heart. You know,
Yeah, this is Raymond's vision. If
Yeah.
you think you're
Yeah.
the heart of the Lakes region, then you're the heart of the Lakes region.
Home is where the heart is, right?
You gotta have a home though.
But I think it's also good that you touched on in here that this is a desirable community, because I think we heard a lot of that in the survey. People were like, you know, almost people, like what I felt from the survey was almost people being like, don't tell too many people about all the great things we have here. So.
Okay. Well, we'll take another crack at it and come back with more.
I have a
Frank?
question for the entire committee, not to be answered right this minute, but to think about. What do you think the ideal population of Raymond should be in 10 years?
We're at
What a
what
number.
now, 39, you're around 3,900?
4,000.
4,000, round numbers.
4,000, 4,200. So we're talking, you know, whatever people would think, but I'd just be interested in people's views and what they think the ideal population of Raymond should be in 10 years.
Interesting survey question.
Yeah, we should include that on our next survey.
Is there, are there any, and maybe this is a Chris question, are there any stats that kind of create, like if you look at a curve, right, is there the smallest possible population to be able to provide the most possible services? Like what is that value point?
Taxes?
Well, I just meant like, you know, we're small.
Right, yeah.
You know, what could you know, a 10,000 person town offer, and you know, can we get those same services with only 500 more people, or only 200 more people? You know, at what point do you know we can't offer all the services of these big towns, and you know we don't want to necessarily, but I'm curious if there's like a rule of thumb there.
I don't know of one. I think there's too many variables.
Yeah.
Like what it was discussed earlier is, you know, we do affordable housing. You got to have the services to back that up. General assistance, more oil available for low-income people, and you know, it'd be more stress on the schools, and you know, there's too many variables. I don't know how you'd ever come up with that stat.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked your comment. I'm kind of changing the subject. I liked what you said is home is where the heart is. Because I was thinking when you said that, well, I've never left. I've been here all my life. I've been to a few other places for short periods of time, but I always come back. And it's just like Peter said, I love the mountains, I love the lakes, I love the streams, the views. The density is appropriate for me. I like it. There's still hunting and fishing and all those things. So I don't know, but I haven't seen a lot of growth in my 16, 17, 18 years here. I have not seen a lot of growth. I've seen Wyndham explode, and I've seen it knocking at the door. Gorham's exploded, Westbrook's exploded. There's no place left but to come to the heart where we are. So I don't know. I think the vision statement that you read sounded very responsive to try to balance that. I liked some of the, you know, add a little detail, but I think the vision statement was really good. I liked it. I liked the simplicity of it. So I think a little tweaking will be there.
And I think it's worthwhile to tell everyone here that we talked a long time about the importance of our values and our priorities and how we place value on our priorities and how that shifts with the different needs of the community. So what we came up with is meant to be flexible with a structure and a mind towards what we value. It's meant to lead us for the next 10 years. And we can keep doing that, but I think that's going to be our true goal, not just, within the vision, but to really impart on every single thing we do as a committee for the plan.
I don't know how we emphasize what Greg said, that people vote with their feet. The children leave because they can't afford to stay here. They can't afford a home. They can't find a job. that pays them well enough to stay. The other side of that coin is the older population isn't retiring. They're getting retirement, but they're still working. I see that everywhere I go. It's, to survive, people have to, Social Security's not enough. Your retirement isn't enough. You just need one little health issue and you're over the edge. So people continue to work, and I'm one of them. So that's another thing that, but I want to stay here.
And we appreciate the fact you're still working with us.
Well, I didn't say it for that reason, John, but I appreciate what you're
I
saying.
want you to keep going.
Is this a threat, Chris?
Huh?
You're threatening us.
I know. No. It was not.
Kayla?
Yes, well, I don't have an answer to your question, John. I did find this and I thought it was interesting. If there is a sweet spot in the relationship between community size and resident satisfaction, it can be found in a location where residents have access to both decisions and resources.
Thank you, Kayla.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
I
that.
liked it
You're
too.
welcome.
Yeah, I would just, Danelle, I wanted to just say one thing in response to something you said about how, we all expect that, things will change, there will be pressure, this vision statement will guide us over 10 years. I think it's important to make sure that we're including in that then the specific things that like you don't want to change too,
Great.
by which I mean like natural, specific natural resources and things like that. Because I think it's important to be like, hey, things are going to change. This is a flexible statement. But Raymond really values like our lakes and our creeks and all that kind of stuff, and we don't want to see that change. That's not flexible.
I think that's great. Thanks for giving us the flexibility to do that. We're 100% behind that. We'll put that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
But we know there's some other things that are necessarily going to change or require a response to the change.
So it seemed that
Housing
this-
being one, climate probably being one.
remaining fluid would be something that would come to my mind after what Peter was saying, is because we can project, but so often we're wrong.
Right.
I thought we'd have an economy downswing 3 or 4 years ago and stood up in front of the council and our selectmen and said that, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So, you can have a crystal ball all you want, but sometimes they get pretty cloudy.
Yeah, I think one of the purposes of the comprehensive plan, from my perspective, I'm not sure it's reflected in the community, but it's that really, I don't believe that you can control growth. What you can do is manage growth.
Right.
Because there are so many variables. There's the market forces and everything else that comes into play, and the unknowns.
So Raymond has to be in a position to adapt.
To adapt,
Yes.
to remain flexible, to address the
Fluid conditions of
fluid conditions of growth
of
and
growth and development.
and
Economic impacts. Is it, like Peter said, there's so much that's out of our control.
So which kind of, it brings it full circle, but I don't want to get into too deep a discussion on this, but listening to the vision statement, it sounds great to me, but it's kind of like, maybe at the next meeting, we need to discuss a little bit more about community resiliency
Yeah.
partnership.
yeah.
Because, we're all expressing what we feel the community wants, which is for us to be prepared to manage the coming changes. And that means getting involved with groups that are going to help us preserve what we all want. And once again, understanding that, as I recall in the discussion last month, and Sue made an excellent point, and every one of our department head discussions hit on staffing and what's available. And so, I believe my takeaway at that meeting was that, we've got to be very careful about what we bite off, because right now, especially, staffing is limited as far as support, which means more would come on to this committee and/or the development of another group maybe made up of individuals in this committee that are going to make that their charge and to work on a resiliency partnership agreement with this group. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah.
So if I understand it, what we have is an excellent first draft. If I could impose on the work group to maybe take all of this information in, tweak it a little bit, and we could look at it next month, would that make sense?
Happy to.
Thank you. Great work. Great work. Absolutely. Okay. Public outreach. Check-in.
So the public, you have a little work group, right? Do you want to report back on anything?
Absolutely. I started, I call it boots on the ground kind of thing, just go into each business. I haven't hit every single one. So for this past week, I hit 33 businesses.
Wow.
What I did is I started at Shipman's, farthest part, Raymond towards Wyndham, and I worked my way west. Overall kind of consensus, so I kind of stopped right before Good Life Market. Pretty receptive, but a lot of people didn't know who the heck we were. And I was talking to an employee at the dollar store, and she's asked me about trash and, like, you know, made a comment that the residents of Raymond are dumping trash into their dumpster. So I said there wasn't much I could do about that, but I would let everybody know. But
Any dumpster is considered
it's a-
contained, is what I found here.
I would say there were the floor design, Ray's Barber Shop in Vapor City, that little area right there, super receptive. I just want to give a shout out to Hannah of the Bloom Shop, and then Dan over at the Barber Shop. They were just super receptive. Hannah knew about us. She said that she understood a big push and everything, so I just thought that was great. A lot of people, like I was saying, didn't know who we are, but the flyers that North Star had made for us, Peter also included the date of our January 20th meeting, and then which was included on there, and with that I put our business cards there. So there was a good push. If anybody is interested in helping out, I've still got to do the other side of 302.
I'll go with you.
Okay, Frankie has interest, and if you're interested, we could split it up a little bit. I had stopped right before Good Life Market. Portland Glass was another area that was very receptive. Most of the people I'm finding that work there are not from Raymond, but I still want to include them in and say, hey, that's okay. You're still part of our community. Please come out. So we'll see if you're driving by any of these places and you happen to stop in and you don't see the flyer in the window, maybe the employee didn't understand, threw it out. So if we can make that push to make sure every single place has a flyer or business cards, that would be awesome. So still more work to do with that, but yeah, I'll get together with you two and get you some flyers, and I'll give you where I kind of stopped, and then we could kind of divide it up. But it was kind of fun. Actually, I had my wife drive me around, and just easier to kind of get out and work it that way. She had a blast doing it. Yeah, so that's that. I'll get with you both and work on it a little more.
That's great.
Kayla has a hand up.
Yeah.
Kayla.
Yes, I'm wondering how we feel about creating a Facebook page. I don't recall if we've discussed this or not, but it might just be another avenue, a way to get the word out.
I think a Facebook page would be beneficial. I mean, just nowadays you have everything. You have your website, you got your Instagram, but not everybody uses those things. So having the website is obvious, but having a Facebook is probably something that we should be doing because that's a measurable track. We can see how many followers we have on that, so we can know if we can get the word out quicker. If they're seeing it multiple times, they're seeing it on our Facebook page, and they are signed up for the email and they're getting hit with it a couple of times, they're more likely to remember. I wouldn't mind a Facebook page.
So how would we go about creating that?
I think
It's
someone
fairly
from the committee.
easy. You basically just create a page.
Yeah, someone on here, this committee who has Facebook and knows how to do it, I recommend could volunteer.
Greg Foster.
I don't have a Facebook, so.
I'm not a facer.
I hate Facebook.
You don't use it.
I didn't say that.
I will volunteer to create a Facebook page.
Thanks, Kayla.
Thank you, Kayla.
No problem.
Out of that.
And I was out last evening in the parking lot for the shuttle bus for the Halloween
great.
shuttling to downtown. I didn't actually get to the downtown, but I did get a report from my granddaughter that it was amazing. And I did happen to be situated at a point in the parking lot of Sherry Gagnon, and there was a headless horseman that rode by, which impressed me. And so I handed out about 45, and once again, everybody was very respectful and receptive, and no one had a clue who we were.
You handed out 45 flyers, you said?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I got that out. And a shout out to the Public Works Director, who basically was directing traffic and kept everybody safe, and our Rec Director, who drove the bus. So, I had to shout across to the Public Works Director, what is it you don't do? And he just shouted back and said, go home. And also,
there's more truth in that than he would admit.
and also, I talked with Frank before this meeting, and we both plan on being at the elections and getting more of the flyers out.
Sue, did you receive a box of business cards in the mail today?
Oh,
I received a couple of boxes that are heaped up on my desk.
Okay.
We have been, well, it doesn't
You have the
matter at
election,
all.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah.
So I was just going to
It's
say, I
crazy.
got a notification that the business cards were delivered
Okay,
at
so
like
I'll
4
look for
p.m.
them.
today. So it
Perfect.
sounds like we'll have more with the January date on it and the funny talking fish that you can pick up from Sue.
Yes.
If I could make a comment on that, just business-wise myself, sending out mailers and that kind of thing, they don't do really good when they're sitting at your home, you know. So with the business cards, I had a whole box. Sue gave me a whole box, and my mission was to hand out all of them within that, because if they're sitting at my home, they don't do any good. And my vision is to have these flyers and these cards plastered all around Raymond. Like, you going and doing this, I went to a lot of business I just never went into, and thinking about how many people go into these businesses, if they're constantly seeing that flyer, I think we're gonna have a great turnout for January.
Yeah, thank you all for doing this. I think this is good stuff.
We do have a few people take them from the town office. We have them piles on the counter. Though I saw one lady take it today, and I thought, oh, that's great, she's interested. And then she came back and held it up like this and said, honey, there's 127,000 miles on the car. So they have had other uses, just saying.
The question is, did she keep it?
Kayla had a...
Kayla?
Yes, thank you. I was speaking with, or messaging with Jody Carroll. I don't know if any of you know who she is. She's a school board member, very involved in the town. And she just had some thoughts on our upcoming public outreach event in January, stating that she thought a lot of families would be busy during a Saturday early afternoon with skiing. I guess that's a popular time for skiing for families. She thought maybe we could work with the Recs department and collaborating with them on some sort of PTO combined fundraiser where the rec department sort of takes care of the kids, and the parents can then join one of our events where we talk about the comprehensive plan committee as a way to kind of lure families into this conversation. So I don't know if that's something we would like to consider or talk about further, whether we'd like to try to incorporate that into our upcoming January event or a future event where we sort of team up with Parks and Rec. And it's an opportunity to work together with another community organization and help them raise funds.
I think that's a great suggestion. So if I'm understanding it, Kaylee, it would be like an event sponsored by the rec department that would basically be available to the children of the parents that would attend our workshop.
Yes, so she was saying, like we could put the kids in the gym across the street at Raymond Elementary, and then at the Jordan Small Middle School, hold the parents sort of event where we can give them food and, you know, and entertain them by talking about the comprehensive plan committee.
Sure. I'd ask, is there any liability associated with that?
I don't know. That would be more of a Joe question, but I can certainly ask him.
Could you ask that, just as far as that goes? I know that sometimes the issues are with the daycare is that there's insurance issues or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great idea, and I guess we'd have to explore with Joe as far as whether that's something.
So Raymond already runs basically essentially a daycare program with their summer rec program.
Oh.
So I'm not quite sure if that's sort of transferable in this idea. And I know that other places like the Boy Scouts, I believe one year they offered the same sort of thing where it was around Christmas time, and they said, hey parents, would you like a free night to go out and do your Christmas shopping? We will take care of your kids and feed them pizza and let them run around our space for $20 or something. So it'd be kind of melding that idea together as a way to take away the barriers for parents attending.
Sure, I think it's a great idea. I just want to explore if there was any liability issues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We could
that's
do
a
that.
great idea, Kayla. If we can incorporate childcare into one of these events, that would be great. We can even have a kids activity related to the comp plan if, you know.
Really get them early.
Yeah, that's our job.
Keep them here, right? That way they
Keep
don't leave.
them here, right. We want some of those
Get them coloring.
next gens for the next comp plan.
2045.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else involving public outreach? We covered the business cards.
Yeah, so we had a couple more things we wanted to talk about outreach-wise over the next few months. One is that we had budgeted some time to do listening sessions, which is not strictly defined in the budget, kind of would be whatever the committee wants it to be. But we're wondering if we want to try and do some really targeted either interviews or listening sessions with specific members of the community who we haven't heard from already and who we think really should be a voice in this plan. So this could be something that, you know, you all did such a great job with your department head interviews. I think the committee could totally interview some people. North Star can also do some interviews. I'm envisioning this as something very casual where people could either call people, meet at Dunkin' Donuts, you know, not like an official big town event. But I think this could be a way to kind of make sure we hit some certain groups in the community. So we had sort of started to make a list, but for example, representatives of the biggest businesses in town, so Sabre Yachts, the camps. I wonder if this might be a good time to talk to people who run summer camps, since it's not summer camp season. As well as people on the school board or other school volunteers. I'm not sure if we've had select board members participate in all of our stuff, but I think it would be really important to have at least some quick interviews with them, as well as other town boards and committees. So throwing that out there, seeing what you all think, if there's people who might be interested in volunteering to interview some people. Like I said, it can also be North Star can do some of these interviews. We're envisioning something simple and casual, so like just a couple basic questions, you know, like Raymond's strengths, you know, opportunities, what are some threats, what are some things you hope will be addressed in the comp plan, kind of big questions like that, and just adding it all into the public outreach, and hopefully getting those people engaged so they will continue to be engaged, but.
Boy, it sounds like a great idea, and I think the select board and the planning board, I mean, getting their input would be pretty darn important in a something different than a select board or planning board meeting. Or not, maybe it's a regular, just to have it be on the agenda. Maybe that's one way to do it. They'll already be here, and that would be one way to do it. But maybe you were thinking of something a little outside of
I think
in a different room.
Yeah, I think it could be either one. Like, one thing you could do is, we can have volunteers go to make sure we're hitting every committee in town and saying, we're doing the comp plan, here's a couple big questions, let's talk about this. The other thing is if, it might be easier, you can, meet up with select board or planning board members, either as a little group or one-on-one, before a meeting, something like that.
The difficulty with little group is illegal meetings.
Yes, we don't want it to be an illegal meeting.
And having a quorum.
Yes.
So that's one potential issue. The other is if they are going to discuss anything and committee members just go and talk in or make comments in public comment, there is no discussion there. It is simply a comment and thank you very much and next. There is no discussion normally, so we would be getting on the agenda for the meetings if you were going to do it in a meeting setting. Otherwise, you'd really need to interview one or two at a time to avoid the illegal meeting issue.
But also if there are other groups, not just town volunteers, other groups in town that we might not be thinking of.
Well, did the library, for instance, get interviewed? I
They
don't
did,
recall,
yeah.
Because we have had a change of librarian
Okay.
and whatnot, so that might be a thought to talk with our new librarian.
And you said businesses too, right, Kate? Okay.
I think definitely the larger businesses in town we should try to get some information from. And that might be something that's easier for us to work with Sue on. And maybe some people on the committee want to volunteer to get on another committee's agenda. But yeah, if there are other groups, if there are school groups or sports groups or church groups or senior groups or other things that I don't know about, this would be a great sort of way to use this time before our first big public meeting.
And I will be putting together the select board meeting for November, which is just a week after next. That may be too soon, but I'll be doing that day after tomorrow. So, just a thought.
How about this, if the committee can kind of look at its contacts, individuals or groups that it's familiar with outside of a meeting, or wanting to get on an agenda of an upcoming committee meeting, why don't you just send that through to myself and Kayla, just so that we can track it, and so we don't end up being redundant and having somebody get 3 different phone calls for the same thing.
Yeah, and maybe we'll touch base in like a week and a half or so, and we can see where we're at.
Sure.
And Sam and I will follow up with Sue about maybe some individual business contacts or nonprofits or things like that we can contact people.
Would we use the same, would you have the questions available that we can run off of?
Yeah, I was actually going to offer too, we could even put the questions in a Google form, so it's really easy for either you to record things or you could even send people that link. If someone might not want to give a public statement on something, but
Type a response and send it back.
Exactly, it
Via
can be
link or
anonymous.
Is that something that could also be added to the website and the new Facebook page?
The new Facebook
so that anyone could, if you just want to leave some comments on.
Yeah, we can add that. And like I said, we were thinking to keep it super simple, just kind of like a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities kind of questions that, people might be familiar with, and then asking, is there anything you are particularly hoping will be in this comprehensive plan?
Great.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we'll follow up in like a week and a half, 2 weeks about that with Peter and Kayla and the committee. Then the last thing I wanted to talk about quickly was to see if we want to do another video before the public meeting in January. Because that's something that can go on our Facebook page. You can also promote videos on YouTube for a small cost, so that's something we can do
Sure.
that might help before the meeting.
I did like the suggestion, I think at the last meeting, about a interview on the street, that type
Yeah.
of thing, with just, standing outside a popular business or the Shaws or whatever, or something in Raymond, where there's enough traffic, and just, do you have a minute just to answer a couple of questions? And, I don't know that we need video releases or anything like that.
YouTube is tricky. You can show anybody falling down or their
Yeah.
face, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's on the street type thing. I think that's generally public. If someone says, no, get away from me, then you don't video
I
them.
think the distribution will be fairly limited
Yeah.
to where hopefully
Yeah.
we wouldn't run.
But, and once again, just a couple of those, big questions,
Yeah, I think.
and they could even mimic maybe some of the big questions we had on the initial survey.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I would love to have something that we're working on putting out maybe in December to be getting people, so we can be pushing it for the January meeting. My follow-up question is going to be, does anyone want to volunteer to interview people on the street? Do you want to work with me to pick a time to do that?
I'm wondering.
Does anyone have
even
children? You
Just to the event coming up, that Frank and I are going to the election, and certainly
Yeah.
I invite anybody else to do that. Let's just coordinate so that we're not all there at the same time. But to just, say, would you mind just, stepping aside for a minute, and not inside the election,
Yeah.
but right outside, and just have them, share a couple of minutes of video with us.
Yeah, and I think the same questions we ask the kids, really, like what's the best thing about Raymond? What's your favorite place in Raymond? Just things like that. Will work for all ages. But I'm happy to help coordinate on specifics of that too. If you want to set up a time where we go and film, we can do that. But everybody has a cell phone now, so.
Yeah. All right, so I'd say anybody that's got an idea about doing the man or woman on the street interview, get in touch with Kate, and if you'd like her to be available to give you some assistance in that.
Kate, if you need me to find more kids, I can find more kids.
My kids love the camera, so I'll
Kayla's
volunteer
here.
them.
Great.
We'll have to come up with new questions for the kids who have already been interviewed.
Yeah, my daughter's birthday party is coming up, so send those questions
good.
over.
All righty, as far as next meeting date, and I have this tentative because I wanted to open it up to the committee for thoughts on a holiday meeting. And in talking with Kate, it was like, we could do a committee meeting light. We could skip the meeting altogether, or we could have a regular full-blown meeting in December 6th. So I'll open that up to the committee for your thoughts.
I do think we should meet in some capacity, because that would only put us one meeting away from our January 20th meeting, and just in preparation for that, not to have a heavy meeting in January plus some. But that would just be my suggestion. If a lot of people are going to be away, I don't think I'll be away, so I'll be here.
Other thoughts?
We're talking about the 6th anyways, right?
Yep.
So I think-
That far into the holidays.
6th and then the 3rd of January.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have to know right now, but we'll also have to just make sure that we'll have people here for the 3rd of January, because that is right after the holiday. Otherwise, we can always reschedule it.
6th, right?
December 6th, yeah.
So we're good for-
I think
So
both
thoughts on any of those dates?
both dates are good with me. I mean, we probably keep the momentum, and if we need one of them to be a little shorter, we might all be tired on January 3rd. But
All right, not hearing any objections, why don't we go forward with those two dates?
Absolutely.
I see no public.
We seem to be fresh out of public.
All right. Well, based on last meeting, that might be good. as far as any committee member comments?
Well, are you guys covered for, what's, election day is 8 to 8, right?
7 to 8.
7 to 8.
7 to 8.
Yes,
7 A to 8 P.
yes.
So what's usually the time
The hot
frames
zones.
for the busiest?
The busiest is between 7 and 9. Around lunchtime, 11-ish to 1, there's usually a little bit of a push. And then around dinner time, so, and after work, so say, it starts picking up around 3-ish and goes till maybe 6. And then by 7:30, it's usually we're looking at each other, we'll get older for half an hour
Gotcha.
and watching the clock go round and round.
All right.
So bring Sue treats at 7:30.
So I'll coordinate with Frank, and if there's anyone else that's interested, just let me know, and we'll
Great.
coordinate a time.
Yeah.
And,
For that.
And Sue, if there's some way we can get a hold of some flyers, that'd be helpful.
Do you still have,
I
you have enough of the businesses?
I do. I think you gave me about 80, I believe.
I think so.
And there's 79 technically businesses, so I probably won't have any to spare, to be honest.
Okay, yep, perfect.
And you'll have
So-
business cards.
And we have the
Yes,
business
we'll have
cards as
business
well.
cards too.
Okay, I'll coordinate that with you.
Okay, perfect.
Alrighty. If there's no other comments, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I second.
All right. Been moved and seconded, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.